Hey everyone, welcome back to DC Motorworks. Today we've got four R230 SL chassis. Today we're going to show you some common problems and why these can be so tough to maintain. Let's get started. So today we've got four flavors of SL, all a little different. These two here are both early SL 500s from 2003, which have the M113 5-liter V8 and the 722.6 5-speed automatic transmission. On my far right, we've got a 2005 SL 500, so it'll have the same engine, but they've updated some of the electronics, as well as this one has the 722.9 7-speed transmission. So a little more lively to drive with the extra gears compared to the very early cars. And here we've got a SL 600. So this one comes with the M275 bi-turbo V12. And this is also what we call an early car. So these were ran from model year 2003 through 2012. And they got, I'd say, is 3 to 4, depending on how you argue, facelifts or updates throughout the years. So you've got 03 cars, and then in 04, 05, they changed some of the electronics and went to the new transmission, just in the V8 cars. And then in 2007, you had a major update where they updated the ABC suspension, updated the engines, amongst many other things. And then for the last couple model years, they actually did a facelift of the body as well. So you can immediately tell those are different because they have a much more angled off headlight instead of this double oval one that we've got on these. But some of the common problems here, we'll start with the one on this end. So as I said, this is an 03 model, first model year. If you notice between all the cars, visually the front end looks a little different. And that's due to the grille. You can see this 500 and the 600 both have aftermarket grills, whereas this is the original style. But these have a very common problem, that they start to crack and fall apart. And usually it's the mounts, which there's like 4 of them up here. But they'll break off and the grill becomes floppy and loose, and people end up replacing them with the less expensive aftermarket ones because this factory plastic grill is between $500 and $600. You can see on these early cars, they did usually equip them pretty well in the early days. These are both equipped with AMG bumpers, the sport package as they called it. You also get the 5-spoke AMG wheel. But one of the big complaints we have about these cars is the interior build quality. You can see here, these generally fall apart. These are your map pockets. See, they're supposed to fold out together as one fluid motion, but generally they don't. And I've seen them where these are falling down, hanging off. The material will be loose here. The seats are generally pretty good, but the rest of the vinyl and other plastics, you can see these would start to loosen up. You can see the dash there. See more. One of the biggest things on these is all the plastics. It just starts to fall apart. See some material there around the door handle coming apart. These are the cup holders. They were quite a mess too. So you can see this one, the cover's broken, but that one actually comes out like it's supposed to. That's how it's supposed to work. It's a little sticky. Should be one fluid motion, just like that. There we go. You can see the location of these is also not great. So if you have condensation from your cup, you can start dripping on your shifter, which is a big issue, or on your climate module, amongst many other things. You can see also a screen here on the command unit. It's pretty unfortunate. See more of that mat pocket there. Another big one here on the non-pano roof cars. It's this headliner board. The clips are just hot glued on the back, and they separate from the board and make it floppy. But the main reason this car came in is because this power operated roof is inoperable. I'll show you. See, we got some more there. It's super common that the switches don't stay secured to the door panel and push through. The trunk switch should be right here. You can see how they're recessed because they've pushed through. More material falling apart. Switch on the seat. This is to move it forward and back, which isn't working. But the top on these is a major expense. It can be over $10,000 to rebuild this top. I'll show you on one of the other cars, because another common problem is between the what we call the PSE, or pneumatic systems equipment. So all the door locks and a bunch of other functions in the vehicle are run by vacuum. And specifically on the trunk latch, there's a vacuum diaphragm there that breaks. It won't open or close properly like this one. But the top on this one is out of fluid as it's developed leaks. And these have, 11 or so main cylinders for the top. So you've got your trunk lock pawl, one on either side there. You've got one to lift the trunk, which is back here. You've got your rear cylinders facing this way. You've also got your main lift cylinders and your roll bar cylinders. You've got one cylinder here, which is the main culprit usually, right there at the top of the windshield. And the trick on these is that the lines do not separate from the hydraulic cylinders. I'll show you on this one here. Another tidbit, we call these the bat wings. You can see how that one's floppy, and that one too. So these had an issue where in here you can see this piece here. On the updated model, it'll be an X pattern, which we can show you on one of the later cars. So this one has had one side done. You can see the pattern here. But this one is original. And it allows these bat wings to be loose and floppy. And when it does, it will trigger off one of the micro switches and the top will not operate. Most of these seem to have been fixed by now, but it's surprising to see this one has both original. Another major issue we've seen as these have aged is this rear window. You can see sheet metal under it here start to rust, and it'll rust all the way through the bottom and create holes. You'll start leaking into the trunk water and fill up the trunk full of water. Like I say, we've seen these where it's filled this bottom end full of water and destroyed the top pump and gotten the battery all covered, and this other fuse box back here caused all kinds of electrical problems. Pull up the cover here. Under this nice piece of foam you get, that is the top hydraulic pump. You can also see some of the yellow vacuum lines running every which way. See all the different cylinders that all attach here. But these lines scatter all over the car. And like I said, that one on top of the windshield, you actually have to trace the lines from back here at the pump, goes up the trunk. You can see them right there poking through. Goes up the roof frame, comes up to about in here, loops back, and runs all the way around the top of the roof up to that cylinder. So it's very labor intensive, and especially down here in this hinge, If you don't get it positioned just correctly, you can either pinch or rub through one of those hydraulic lines. So with all that labor involved, it can be, like I said, $10,000 to have this roof rebuilt. Now with the company we use to rebuild them, Top Hydraulics, they do make it to where the lines can be removed. So if you have to do any subsequent repairs, it is much more serviceable. You can also see here you get a space saver spare with a tire pump. Here we've got one of the batteries. So these use a 2-battery system where there's one starter battery dedicated just to start the vehicle up in the engine compartment. This is what we call the system battery. It controls all the electric systems in the vehicle. And this is tied together by a switching relay, which is in the passenger's footwell. That allows power to either be split or connected between the 2 batteries. There's also a battery control module back here that controls all of these. If you ever get in one of these and see convenience functions unavailable, it's because this rear battery is below its required voltage. So things like your air conditioning won't come on at full speed, the convertible top will be disabled, amongst many other features, till that battery charges. But started seeing a lot of problems with these battery control modules. They'll set warning lights in the cluster, a big old red battery message, or it'll only charge one battery and not the other, and many other things like that. But those are actually no longer available from Mercedes-Benz. They're only available used. So that's become another concern with these as they've aged. See, this V12 has one of my favorite wheels. They call these Alpharetta. It's like a turbine look wheel. It's always pretty neat. Now, these 600s received a much better interior. You get leather wrapping on the dash, on the door panels. You also get suede on the headlining. You can see here this one's kind of that same thing where the clips are falling down. So this one is equipped with keyless go. That's why it's dinging at us here. It's telling you not to forget your key. You can see these interiors just hold up much better on the V12 cars. I'll show you some of the other systems on these under the hood. So you get your nice V12 hint right there. So other than the badging on the trunk and right there, you have no other ideas. This is a V12 model. Under the hoods here, see the difference here between the 500 and the 600. But I'll show you what we call the killer acronyms. ABC, SBC, and RVC on these cars. So SBC is here on the passenger side. See the acronym denoted there. That's what's called Sensotronic Brake Control. So what it was equipped on the 230s, the 240 chassis Maybach, and the 211 E-Class on the early models. But what it is a brake-by-wire electronically controlled braking system. So when you put your foot on the brake pedal, it actually sends a signal to how much brake pressure you're going to apply. It actually does have some neat features where if it's raining, it'll apply the brakes a little bit here and there to dry the rotors. And it can also sense how quickly you let off the accelerator in order to preload the brakes when you go to move to the brake pedal. So it does have some neat features, but it did have some issues early on, to the point that Mercedes actually warranties this part for 25 years from the original in-service date of these cars. So they occasionally still fail. We don't see it super often anymore. But when they do fail, usually they give you a warning. You'll get a message on the cluster, a white one, as we call it, a white message. because it does have an internal timer that once it has a certain operating time, it requires to be replaced as a safety measure. But when they fail completely, what we would do at the dealer in training is you would unplug it and get a feel for how much braking power is left over. And the manual braking power is only about 20%. So you can about stick your foot out the door and stop faster. It's pretty terrifying. See on the V12 here, it's equipped with the boost box, which we've talked about on other cars. Clark Rupp created that. He is the main rebuilder of these coil packs. You can see his sticker down there on that coil pack as well. But created this to replace the ignition driver module that used to live right there. Back to your acronyms. Got ABC. This is your active body control. So this is a fully hydraulically controlled suspension. You can see on top of the shock there, get your electronic wire. So it's actually a very fascinating system. It doesn't utilize sway bars, and it is equipped on all US SLs, 230 chassis. In Europe, you could get a 350 without it, but we did not receive those here. So all of them have it. Like I said, in 2007, they updated it to ABC Plus. They made a number of changes that improved it. But 2 of these have ABC problems. This one, big problem we had was we had to put 4 ABC pumps on it, which is a tandem pump right here. It runs the power steering and the suspension before we got a good one, because unfortunately, Mercedes-Benz no longer supports that part. So there's only aftermarket rebuilds available or used ones. And it took us that many tries to get a good one. And just to give you some perspective, it's about 6 hours billable time to remove and replace that pump and bleed the system. A big issue on that system is maintenance. Every 2 years the fluid should be changed, but Mercedes-Benz does not tell you to change the fluid. You've also got the accumulators. Depending on the year, you've got between 3 and 4 on these. You've got your pressure accumulator here. You've got a main accumulator for the front and the rear. And on some of them, you have a rear pressure supply accumulator as well. But as they age, they do require to be replaced. And that plus regular fluid changes does keep that system more reliable. So hoses aren't blowing out as often on you and so forth, because when this system goes down, the car will be completely on the ground and pretty much undrivable. But what we started noticing recently is the level control rods. So at each corner, there is a level sensor that senses the ride height. And there's a rod, which I'll show you now. So these are those rods. It goes from the level sensor to the control arm. What we've been having issues with here recently is these ball joints will fall apart, and this rod will pop off, and depending on where the level sensor was, it'll either drop or raise it to full one way or the other, full height or full dropped, make it undrivable again. These have become harder and harder to get. On the early cars, this one has an issue with that too. The front ones are no longer available. And on this one, you can still scrounge up a few. This one's got one broken on the right front and one broken on the left rear. We've just popped them on while we were waiting on these to show up so that it can be at its normal height. But they came in with one leaning one way and one leaning the other, which I've got a picture of. I'll pop in here. Some resort to doing, like on this one here, has been converted to coilovers, which we don't recommend. There's a lot of options. Like on this one, we rebuilt the valve blocks and have done a bunch of other work to get this system working. Like I said, due to those sway bars not being there, it is very difficult to install them. And if you don't, the car just doesn't feel quite right. And so we like to keep the system intact. It does end up being a little bit more costly, but not by much. if you just keep up with the system. Here you can see where I was talking about with the grill. These tabs are what usually break, and this one's holding on, but usually they'll break off right here and they'll start flopping around. So that covers most of the major stuff we run into on these. There's always your normal stuff, engine mounts, control arm bushings, and regular maintenance that you run across. But you can see these are still being kept on the road. You know, they're not to the point that people give up on them. They are a very rewarding driving experience. They handle very well. Of course, you get the ones with big power. They are very enjoyable. The early 500s I don't like as much. They're a little down on performance with the 5-speed transmission. I said the 7-speed does liven it up a lot, but generally I like to go for the AMG or V12 models. So like I said, they all come with the ABC, so it's really not much of a more expense to have a V12 car. And it does make a big difference on these when they need engine mounts, as the engine has to come out, which you may have seen in one of our other videos, whereas the V8 cars, they can stay in the car. But if you're looking at one of these, just keep an open mind that you're going to spend a lot of money in maintenance and keeping up with it. But with one that's kept up with, they are very enjoyable. Thank you all for watching. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.